We got an interesting one today. This is a AOG G, and it's a GA airplane. This is an experimental. It's called a SeaRey, and it is an experimental home-built version of an amphibious aircraft. Notice the interesting way the landing gear retracts. Now, part of that is right here on the gear actuator is a cable, and the cable has broken right here and pulled through, and that cable goes down and around and then runs all the way back under the tail to extend the tail wheel, which has a spring holding it up normally. And right now we are using a wiring fish, like an electrician would use to pull conduit or pull wire in a house, to try and feed that wire all the way up through this hull so I can grab the other end of it and feed the new cable. This is going to be the first AOG I've ever done where I might have to do a little swimming. We'll see how the project goes.
Yeah, nobody really expects to see airplanes here anymore. Alright, this is going to be huge. I'm going to stand on it. The board.
Yeah, that might actually work.
I might be able to make my way out to you.
That might just work.
Yeah, it's not.
He's shocked.
I think this ain't winter time. Oh, yeah. Well, I got a wetsuit. Going super slow.
using those ramps and the winch, we were able to get her up high and dry, and also the jack that he has that's custom made for lifting the tail of the plane. And now I've got to, in order to access all of this, I've got to take off this panel, which is all riveted on, which means I have to unbolt this, which means I have to disconnect the lift cable that keeps the tail from just folding up on the leading edge. So I had to undo the safety wire. Now I got to see if this turnbuckle isn't too rusted to come apart, because it ain't giving me a warm fuzzy looking at all that rust on the threads. But what actually broke was right here. This is the cable that extends the landing gear, and we found, you can see it right there, there's a chunk missing out of the side, and of course that cable jumped the track and got up in here next to the bolt and sheared. It goes around these two, and actually that upper one, yeah, it's still, something got in there and froze that up. I'm gonna have to pull all that loose. The cable goes around these and then up into these plastic guides, and there's another one way up there in the front where it goes through the back of the transom of the hull right there, so we're gonna have to deal with that as well. But this right here, it's spring loaded up, which is good, but this right here is how the gear extends when the cable pulls it correctly. So at least that's all working right. So with the tail wheel strapped up out of the way, you can see the guide tube for the extension cable. Gonna have to drill that rivet out, and then I drilled the rivets out for this fairing in the tail section. And there's another guide tube here going into the transom itself, and since the new cable comes with this, the end already swayed like that right there on the bolt, I'm gonna have to pull that tube out of here, drill that hole larger without damaging the boot on the elevator control rod, so that I can pass the end of the cable through the transom right there. So now I've taken the rivets out. Oh, I gotta knock the stem out of that one. I got the head off, and I'm gonna have to pull this tube out the transom like so, and then I'm gonna have to drill that up with a step drill big enough to put the swage end of the cable through that hole, and then obviously we'll really seal it with silicone just like they did there. And then that is where the other guide was for the cable before it ran back to these pulleys. We're going to pull these pulleys off, and he's going to have to replace both of them as well. So this is the cable end that I've got to get through that hole in the transom. There's my step drill. I may have to go home and find a bigger step drill, but that should probably do the trick. So this is another place where this flexible attachment will allow me to get that in there. Hopefully it'll provide the torque I need to drill through the fiberglass. So there you can see it's actually doing a pretty good job drilling this whole thing. Okay, so we've got our fish tape run up into the hull. We've got the other end secured here to the end of the cable. The cable runs around down there, and there is actually a plastic lead. See it right there when I wiggle it over with a clamp on it. It guides the cable there, and then it just makes the run all the way back to the tail. So as it stands at this point, we've got cable run, and we put some RTV where it goes through the hull, so it's all sealed in there. and that RTD is still running, so it's no good. Lovely. We're gonna have to replace it with something else. Lovely. It's been there for a few days now. I'm gonna get that all over everything because it's on my fingers. Then we need to put some rivets in for the standoffs. There's a clamp on the other side. I have to do the same thing on this side with that cable right there, which I didn't pull the guide back far enough. Lovely. And then there's another cable guide right here that also needs our standoff riveted on. And today I have replacement pulleys right here, so we're gonna do that, connect that up, and then work on putting this all back together. So we got our new pulleys in place right here. Get my ugly hand out of the way, and just got to connect the end on there and do the rivets for these cable guides, and then we can put the whole splash guard back up onto the turtle deck with the correct hardware. But yeah, both of these pulleys, the bearings are shot. Cannot rotate them when you hold the center. And then, so that means the cable was probably, well, the pulley was turning on the bolt that was acting as the axle, which would have bounded a little bit, but there's the chunk out of the side of the pulley that allowed the cable to jump, entangle, and break. Now I just took the clamp, or the strap that was holding the tail wheel in the down position, and it's interesting because this is actually the full length of the cable. We got the guard here on the pulleys. I just find it interesting that the tail wheel sits that far from actually fully down with it fully extended, but it came pre-swaged, so I can't change that. Obviously, once the weight comes on the wheel, it is going to sit correctly. And this actually is something aftermarket the builder added to have this target and magnetic sensor to tell you the tail wheel's down. Unfortunately, if you look at the holes he tapped, it would bust off whatever is there. So he had one siliconed in place, and of course it's missing. If I was going to do it, I would probably actually screw it into this side of the thing, because it's not going to touch anything. And that way, because these magnetic proximity sensors, you literally get it within an inch usually, and they'll sense it and trigger. Just installed the bolt that holds the lift cable for this edge, and now I got to tighten it. And I was basically told you want a deep bass thrum when you pluck the cable, so something like that is the correct tension. This here is one of the beauties of home builds, is stuff from the good old hardware store or automotive store can be used to repair your aircraft instead of expensive aviation grade stuff that comes at a premium. That's the rivet for one standoff. Might tap that a little bit with a hammer, but it's in good place. Won't go anywhere. Now I'm getting down to finishing, is putting these nut plate clips in so we can do it with screws the way this is supposed to be installed, not pop rivets. So now we're down to the point of just tightening up the lift cables because they were installed correctly. They're supposed to go like that so that the splash cover on the bottom of the turtle deck is just cut away around it so it doesn't touch it. I've already got that cable all tensioned up, and now we've got screws here instead of these rusty steel rivets. Stainless steel screws with nut plates are screwed into the frame members for the splash guard. So you can play the Jaws theme on your airplane. So here's my next challenge for the day: double wire safety wrapping on, or safetying on a turnbuckle. They did it on that one, so at least I have one that's good that I can copy. Something literally I have not done in 30 some years. When I got my A&P, I had to do this for my test, and it's the last time. And I'm going to relearn it all. That's not fun.
All right, quick video. Gear is down. Gear is up. Tested it several times, actually way more than several times. Everything working beautifully. I'll cycle it a bunch more times just to make sure, but we're ready to go.